bit of both. And actually, he started out on animals when he came back from the Outback. He started realizing he had healing gifts, and he was working on horses, and he just found that there wasn't as much resistance from animals. And so what he was doing, and thank you for clarifying, he was a conduit for this energy. And so he would place his hand, for instance, on the little dog that had a broken spine. He placed his hand on the spine, and energy would come through him and go into the spine of the dog. Now, he was working with a solar angel called Julie. And Julie was the one sending the healing and the energy, but she used Gary as the conduit so she could see through his eyes. And he could watch her laser off tumors. He could watch her, he could see inside the body. He started developing these abilities, and they worked together as a team.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to KAren Swain, teacher of Deliberate Creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello, welcome to Accentuate the Positive with KAren Swain. I've got another fascinating guest for you today to have a conversation with. Her name is Robbie Holz, and she is intuitively guided self-healing practitioner who's written a couple of fabulous books, Secrets of Aboriginal Healing and Aboriginal Secrets of Awakening. Hi, Robbie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Karen. Nice to be here.
Now, I probably got your title wrong. Intuitively guided self-healing practitioner.
Right.
I like that. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I like that.
Well, it's more accurate than healer because I help people learn how to heal themselves.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, years ago, I called myself healer. I don't call myself healer anymore. I call myself teacher because of that, because I didn't want people to think that I was actually healing them. I wanted them to feel like I was helping them facilitate their own healing. So it was really more about self-empowerment. So this is the way you've got around that, because healer denotes that you're going to do it for me as opposed to you're going to help me do it for myself.
Right. I'm going to show you how to do it yourself. Exactly. Yes.
Exactly.
It's empowerment, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. So I heard about you from Danielle Gibbons. Do you know Danielle Gibbons?
I do. I just adore Danielle. Yes.
Isn't she beautiful? I interviewed her recently, and we had a bit of a chat with Mother Mary, Danielle Gibbons' channels. Mother Mary, she's been doing that for about 22 years. But after we were having a chat after the interview, and she said, now I have to tell you about Robbie, you know. And I usually have so many people contacting me, I don't. But I Googled you, and I saw what you were doing, and I saw what your husband was doing, and I thought, you know, I'm Australian, and to tell you the truth, I know very little about my very own Indigenous culture here on this great land. You know, I know very little. Like, I've grown up in Australia, and I know very little. So I wanted to help spread their message, because what the mass media is showing us is not the best part of their culture, unfortunately, you know, here in Australia. And I used to spend a lot of time in New Zealand, and the Indigenous culture there is very powerful, very strong. Every newsreader who starts the news gives the Maori greeting, you know, kia ora. And here we don't have a lot of that. You come to Australia, you walk through the airport, you see some Aboriginal paintings, and unless you go out to the Outback and you're with them, that's where your Aboriginal encounter ends if you're in the city. No.
Yeah. So, and my experience is very limited, and so was Gary's. It was with remote Aboriginals in the Outback, near Uluru, Ayers Rock. And I can't speak to all the Aboriginal tribes people. I can just speak to the remote ones that we were connected to. Yeah. And I just think that they were very generous in giving their wisdom and their healing secrets to us and asking us to take it out into the world, which is what we've been doing. So, and even though Gary's passed, he's still helping from the other side very much.
Absolutely. He's here.
He's very
He's here. Yeah, so, you know, the Aboriginal culture, what I know about it, and it's very little, is very secretive. And it's interesting that you've called your book Secrets of Aboriginal Awakening, because they are very secretive, even amongst their own people. You know, there are certain restrictions, rules and regulations that only certain people can know. So I found it interesting that you were, you know, spreading their message. I suspect it's just time for it to come out of that secret closet. But let's get into your story. So it was obviously your husband that it started with. What happened? How did all this come about?
Well, my husband was a physicist, an inventor. He had a lot of patents in deep space, and he also had multiple sclerosis, and he was a quadriplegic, which meant he had very little feeling and movement from the neck down. And the doctors had pretty much given him a death sentence. He had about 6 months left to live because his organs were shutting down. And so even though Western medicine didn't have anything that they could offer him, he discovered through a naturopathic physician from Australia that the remote Outback Aboriginal people might have something for him, that they were known for their remarkable healing gifts. And she knew, this doctor knew how to get in touch with the Aboriginal people. And Gary contacted them. One of them had an apartment in Brisbane. He traversed the village, the remote village, and then I think it was Brisbane. And when he contacted Ray, the Aboriginal man, he said, "What took you so long? We've been waiting for 4 months." They already knew he was coming before he even knew of them, because they're so tuned in to this one consciousness, the grid, whatever you want to call that, unified field. So they knew he was coming. They knew that they were to give their healing secrets to him. And like you said, they didn't want to disclose that. They were very resistant. But the big guy, which is kind of a genderless term for divine source, whatever that means to you, asked them to give their healing secrets to this man because he had the ability to take it out into the world. He was highly respected. And so we wanted to make sure that's exactly what they wanted. And they did, because they told us, the Aboriginal tribes people told us, that we civilized tribes don't really understand how healing works. And so this is why they were willing to disclose these ancient healing secrets. Wow. And I would agree. After understanding what they have to teach us, we're missing the mark. We're missing a big piece. So that's really what put us passionately on this path of teaching people the healing secrets so that we could empower people how to heal themselves. And I healed myself of hepatitis C and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and severe brain damage from experimental treatments the doctors put me on. So it works. It works. And I just really want to get this information out and help people and get their power back.
So, Robbie, how long ago was this? How long ago did your husband come out to Australia? I'm amazed that an American naturopath told him about Aboriginal healing. That's pretty exciting in itself.
It is. And for this scientist, this physicist, he was a physicist who's very immersed in the black and white community. It doesn't exist if you can't prove it to me, that he would even bite at that. I think it just goes to show he was so desperate to survive and that he had exhausted everything he knew. And then along comes this naturopathic doctor who says, well, the remote Outback Aboriginal people have remarkable healing gifts, and I think they can help you. And so even though his logical mind was telling him it was crazy, here he is, a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. Nobody would go with him to the Outback. They thought it was insane, and they thought he won't go if nobody will go with him. But he was desperate, and he went into the Outback and was literally unloaded like cargo off that plane and went into it was a very arduous trip for him. But I think he had 2 children that were kind of providing that motivation to stay alive. And that's really what...
Before you met him, did you go with him?
Yes. This was in 94. Was in 94. I met him in 2001, and then I went into the Outback in 2008, a year after he had passed. So he accompanied me. He just accompanied me from the other side. So tell me more about his journey. What did he discover? A scientist, I don't know if there are too many scientists watching this show, but it would be great if they were, and they would start to look into this. You know, a scientist goes to remote Australia, because let's just put this into perspective for people. Australia, the land itself is almost the size of the States, you know, not including the north part. Alaska,
thank you. I've gone blank. And we have like about 26 million people on the entire continent, because we are a continent. So there is a lot of land and not a lot of people. So when we talk about remote outback Australia, boy, is it remote, right? You've been there.
Very remote, very remote. And this is why I believe that these particular Aboriginal people that we were dealing with were very safeguarded and tucked away in this vast desert, so that they didn't have connection to civilization. In fact, the tribes people had never seen a white person before.
Really?
Yeah, it was only Ray who traversed the city, Brisbane, and the Outback. But they did bring in a healer who was part Aboriginal, part English. They brought her in so that she could speak to Gary and communicate to him. Otherwise, none of the other villagers had ever encountered anyone outside of their tribe as far as Aboriginal people go, white people. So it was pretty extraordinary that they would invite him. It was pretty extraordinary what happened in his 10 days with them, and it was actually continued to be even more extraordinary after he left. But he came out of that desert 10 days later. Now you got to remember, he had been a quadriplegic with no feeling from the neck down for 7 years, and now he came back with feeling for the first time in 7 years. And he clumsily walked down the airplane aisle on that return flight home. But more than anything, Karen, he was transformed emotionally. He recognized that he had had a really abusive childhood. His father was an alcoholic who would beat him when he got drunk. And Gary was this brilliant-minded boy and man, and he learned how to numb himself to emotions until he literally numbed himself physically. And the Aboriginal people helped him understand that that was the core to this numbing, was the emotional core. And that if you don't get to the emotional core, it's like picking the top of a dandelion, it'll come right back again. You've got to get to that core. That's what started it in the first place. It's kind of like people will have tumors removed and they come back again because they haven't changed the emotional mindsets and thought patterns that were creating that in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, you've heard of John of God in Brazil?
Yes.
So, Australians flock to Brazil to go to this healer, and here we've got it in our own backyard.
Yes, exactly. And I think that I just get the sense that they needed somebody from the United States who had no preconceived notions at all of Aboriginal people and no clue about any of it, so that you could get a very untainted picture of really what they were offering. And people contact me all the time and they want to know, how do I get to this tribe in Australia? And we're like, well, the whole point of the book is so that you don't have to trek across, not that you wouldn't want to visit beautiful Australia, but we can save you some time and some money by teaching you these simple techniques in the book so that you know how to heal yourself. And the Aboriginal people live by these 5 principles, not just for healing, but for everything. So it's about manifesting anything you want, not just health. The more I live what they taught me, it's fabulous.
Yeah. I want to get into the 5 principles, but I want to talk more about the Aboriginal people. You said an American, because being an Australian, this is how the mass media have portrayed the Aboriginals. They're useless, they're drunks, it's been a really bad image. Sorry, guys, but it has. And this is how the Aboriginals have been portrayed to us through, and I'm only saying through mass media, because obviously I work in sort of spiritual groups. It's completely different. We always, with anything we do, actually, it's politically correct to acknowledge the ancestors of the land and their ancestors always. I should have actually done that before we started. But they have been portrayed as just angry about the genocide, because obviously when the British arrived, the genocide of the Aboriginal people was the worst genocide of any group, on the planet. I mean, there's been the Jewish genocide, there's been many genocides, but they wiped out many tribes, in our history. So we've had this dreadful history, and that seems to be the topic of conversation when the Aboriginal people have been referred to through mass media. I'm only talking about mass media, not in general. For the first time now, we've got an Aboriginal channel denoted to Indigenous media, which only started a year or so ago. So that's a step forward. But yeah, it's interesting that an American had to come to bring their message to the world, because I don't know, maybe Australians were just hypnotized by the way the media has been portraying them. It's been really interesting.
I think so. And actually, the Australians were surprised that I went to Australia when they said, well, you have Native Americans right there by you.
Yeah.
Never even occurred to me, because we have the same thing. We have the news media reporting and biasing our, prejudices and belief systems about them. So the ones that I'm talking about, the ones that we experienced, I would liken them more to, I kind of felt like they were that they were descendants of Atlanteans who had safeguarded in this vast area in the desert, and that this is information and wisdom that they have passed on word of mouth for at least 60,000 years, if not longer, and that they're living in what I would consider to be a fifth dimensional existence, and we're currently living in a third. And I think that they're showing us very strongly, giving us the information on how to get to these higher states of love, how to get to these states of healing the body. And so I feel that the ones that we're talking about are fifth dimensional descendants of Atlanteans who are generously gave this information because it's time. And I also feel that they're leaving the planet. And this is another reason why they're sharing this information. So
yeah, it'd be great if they shared it amongst their own, maybe too. But anyway, maybe they do. I've got to say, I'm a bit ignorant. I'm no authority on them at all, because here I am an Australian, and I wanted to talk to you because I am not an authority on them, and I think that's
and neither am I. Neither am I. I can only tell you about my experiences with them. And Gary's experiences, and the ones that we encountered Neru LaRue. Because I can't, obviously there's so many different, it's like somebody going to Paris and saying, well, I know what Frenchmen are like. It's like, well, that's just a few people in Paris. So, it's just, I think it was an honor for both Gary and I to be invited. I think it was very unusual. And I think that it was because it was timely, and I think it was our soul's contract.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me, how did you meet Gary? And and when you met him and he told you his story, like what was going on,
oh goodness. Well, I was not an easy sell. I met him at a party of 4th of July people. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a big festival we have here. It's the Independence. And so it's just nothing but fireworks and partying. We just went through that 2 days ago. And so this was a party of probably many, many people who were very gifted, psychics, animal communicators, fascinating people. And I'd heard that this man was coming and that they were really excited about him. But I really had no interest in talking to him because I wanted to soak up all the information from the animal healers and the animal communicators, because that's the direction I thought I was going. And so we ended up sitting next to each other, and he said 2 words to me. He was apparently when we were introduced, all the past lives we had flashed across my face, which just freaked the poor man out. He didn't know, he'd never had that experience before, but he knew there was something unusual about me. And honestly, Karen, I got nothing. I had no idea that we had a connection. So I had no interest in communicating with him. I really just wanted to just kind of latch on to the animal communication chats. So he knew that we needed to be together. I was the woman he'd been waiting for, that we had had many past lives together. And he was known at that point. Now, this was in 2001. He'd come back from the Outback in 94. And he came back and got a doctor's degree in immunology, practicing what the Aboriginal people had taught him, and was very good at his healing practice. He became excellent at it and was helping AIDS people and stage 4 cancers, and a remarkable healer. And so he said to me, if you come in to my clinic, I will teach you how to heal animals. And boy, that was the Achilles heel. That was what brought me in. So, and then he healed my sister. I come from a big Catholic family. There are 6 of us. And one of my sisters in the Midwest, in Illinois, was going blind very quickly. She had lost all her vision in one eye and had a little bit of peripheral vision in her other eye. And it was happening very fast, and the medical community had nothing to offer her. And Gary said, send her out. We lived in Seattle area at the time. Send her out. I think I can help her. And he healed her in 4 days. And that's when something flipped that switch in me. And I just knew he had done that out of love for me. And I just fell in love with him instantly. And
beautiful. That's a beautiful story. I love that. So obviously you wanted to learn how to heal animals. So you were already working as a healer at the time that you met him.
Yes, at that time I was working in the Western medicine. I was working in a veterinarian's office because I wanted to know, what does Western medicine offer? I wanted to get a well-rounded practice, but I didn't know what Gary was doing. And the first thing I brought him was a dog that had a broken spine, and the doctors were going to put the dog down, and because there's nothing else you can do. And I brought this dog to Gary. The vet was kind enough and egoless enough to let him come to her clinic and work on this dog. And after about 4 visits, this dog was healed. And so that's when I'm like, okay, what does he know? That I want to know what he's doing. And that sort of started it on this path. But what I realized is, if you can help heal the people, that's the best thing to do to help the animals, because I saw the animals were letting the healing flow from them right to their owners. I saw that a lot.
Yeah.
So,
we had this conversation about self-healing, and you call yourself a practitioner that helps people self-heal. How does that work with animals? I mean, because, when we have these conversations about healers, Gary healed him, Gary healed her, it looks like Gary's doing the work. And of course, as any healer, because I'm passionate about this, any healer allows that facilitation. Like I just see healers as teachers. I see healers as somebody that helps you release resistance. And
a conduit.
A conduit, and when you release resistance, source energy can flow and healing occurs.
Yes.
But with an animal, how do you do that with an animal? How do you help an animal release resistance? Or are you helping the owner? What's happening there?
Well, it's a little bit of both. And actually, he started out on animals when he came back from the Outback. He started realizing he had healing gifts, and he was working on horses, and he just found that there wasn't as much resistance from animals. And so what he was doing, and thank you for clarifying, he was a conduit for this energy. And so he would place his hand, for instance, on the little dog that had a broken spine. He placed his hand on the spine, and energy would come through him and go into the spine of the dog. Now, he was working with a solar angel called Julie. And Julie was the one sending the healing and the energy, but she used Gary as the conduit so she could see through his eyes. And he could watch her laser off tumors. He could watch her he could see inside the body. He started developing these abilities, and they worked together as a team. So he was very humble conduit for this healing energy to go through him. And he would actually say that he spent more time clearing stuff out. Then you could start the rejuvenation process, because we hold these things in our cells. We have a cellular memory. And it's a different kind of cell. It's very dense and compact. It doesn't hold much life force. And those have to be cleared out before you can start bringing in more.
We do. And as you said before, Gary's healing was about his emotional healing. And
yes.
I'm thinking, because I think that where we get stuck as a society is, even the John of God phenomena. People are flocking to the healers because you're going to heal me. And when I was there years ago, 15 years ago, went all the way to Brazil, could have gone out to the Outback. Anyway, he stood there on stage and said, I don't heal anybody. No healing occurs in my house. He said, the only thing that goes on here is your faith in God. And, that was coming from that very sort of, Brazil is a very religious country, and they speak in that language. But, your faith, your knowing, your trust, your allowing. You're listening. And do you work on animals now?
I don't. I just work on people because I've decided that I can help more if I teach people.
Yeah.
I can reach more. We were helping people who were very, very sick, and decided let's start at the other end of that and start helping people understand how to heal, and then they can help themselves and they can help others. So we sort of switched after a while and realized speaking like this, getting the book out, that sort of information is much more helpful and will ultimately help the animals better. Mm-hmm. So I don't, but to clarify for people, I think they need to understand, and this is what the Aboriginal people helped me understand. Healing takes place with the body, the emotions, and the soul. All three are equally involved in the healing. And most people have the emotions that aren't on board with healing, and they don't know that. The body and the soul's typically involved and aligned with healing, but it's the emotions that aren't. So Gary had to learn to forgive his father and let go of those emotions, those cells that were being created that were, Dr. Emoto showed us in his water experiments, they're a different cell. They're just low vibrating, they don't function, they're disfigured. Those kind of emotions create a perfect breeding ground for disease. And the hardest and most toxic emotions for the body are guilt, Catholic, I know that so well, and self-hatred. Those are so hard on you physically. And the flip side is that love-based emotions emit healing response. Gratitude has a tremendous healing response on the body. So you want to start paying attention to what kind of emotions are you marinating in on a regular basis, because it's creating that body. It's affecting that body.
Mm-hmm. So you were with Gary for a few years, and you said he passed. I'm not going to say you're dead. They hate it when I say you're dead. He said in 2008.
He passed in 2007. 2007. I went into the Outback in 2008.
Right.
Yes.
What was happening during that time?
In 2008.
How did he pass? What was happening?
Well, he came to me a year before he passed and said that he was being told, you have to remember now, when he came back from the Outback, Karen, he was spending hours a day, every day, like the Outback Aboriginal people do, the remote ones, where they're tuned, they unplug from the mind and they plug into this greater consciousnness many, many hours a day. And he came to me and said, I've been told that I will be passing in a year. He'd been told by Julie, his guardian angel or solar angel. And he did. We called hospice in 6 months before he was supposed to pass, and hospice is like, we don't know why we're here. This man is fine. And sure enough, he passed 6 months later. Yeah. He passed, Karen, when I think he knew I was going to be okay. That I could now, he was passing the baton to me to be teaching this. And once he knew I was strong enough, then he would leave. But I didn't expect he would show up every morning after he passed. He's a very punctual man, and he would show up at exactly 8 o'clock. Except one year when he was off, when we had changed our clocks an hour. I don't know if you do that in Australia, don't you? You change the clocks an hour. So that he shows up, and he still shows up. So he's very, very involved. He's just helping more from the other side. And that's what he had been told a year before he passed is, you can be of more assistance from the other side of the veil. And we were really upset about it. And then we decided, well, if you can help more from the other side, then that's what we need to learn to accept. And he's helping tremendously.
Look, I often say that physical life is challenging. I was having this chat with another medium the other day, Jamie Butler, and we were saying, often we say, it'd be so much easier to just do all this from the other side, we don't have to do bodies. And I'm like, why do I do my work from the other side? Do I have to be in this body and worry about my weight and all that sort of stuff?
I know. I kind of look at it as we're ground crew, we're the human members of the team. Somebody has to do the physical work. So apparently we do the short straw. I don't know, but here we are.
So he's lucked out. He's over there in heaven. And he's like, you holding the baton, as you said.
I know. I was pretty upset about that initially. I'm like, why can't I go too? Yeah, but now I understand. Now I get it. My work is, I have to tell you, when I'm on an airplane and people are nervous about it going down, I'm thinking, this plane ain't going down because I have way too much work to do. It's not going down.
Exactly. When you know you're not going to die, you don't get scared, because my guides have said to me, you're going to live a really, long time. And I'm like, really? Anyway, but what I love about your story too is that you've maintained your relationship. As you say, death, I was having this conversation. It's a conversation I like to have. Death creates some of the worst pain on the planet, some of the most suffering and grief. And there are so many people that want to talk about how you've got to grieve for as long as you need to grieve. And grief is just a thought that you've lost someone that you can't get back. It's a devastating thought, but it's not true. It's not a true thought. It's not a true belief. And obviously you've maintained a relationship with him, and that's beautiful.
Yes. I have. We've had, it's been, he died in 2007, or he passed physically in 2007. Yeah. And I've noticed that over the years, and it took me a while, I had to gradually move him out of the bedroom and all the other rooms in the house and just keep him confined to my office, because otherwise I wasn't having relationships with anybody else. I would visit psychics and they're like, well, there's 3 people in this relationship. So when I got rid of our bedspread, that's when all of a sudden somebody showed up to start dating. It's like, okay, so Gary has been slowly moved, just pictures and statues and everything else, to the office. We're business partners now, so to speak. But we dearly adore and love each other, but it had to shift at some point. So it has, yeah.
So he asked you to go out to the Outback and, from the other side, he said, go and experience yourself. And you went in 2008.
Well, I was invited. The Aboriginal tribeswomen decided to open up some of their ceremonies to people from around the world. Very small group. It was kind of an experiment, and the men did not want this happening, and the women sort of won out. And I was invited, and I have no doubt Gary was behind that invitation.
Okay.
So I got to come to the Outback, close to the area that he was, and it was, oh my goodness, it was amazing experience. And we talk about that in the Awakening book. The thing is, it's so different. That culture is very different than ours. And I think in a lot of ways we don't understand them. But the remote Outback Aboriginals that we encountered, they were operating at such a high level of love and service in the present moment. We never knew when ceremonies were going to happen, because it's not like they wait till 5 o'clock. It happens when it's right. And I could feel that they were raising our vibration and frequency. I would wake up during the night when I was in the Outback and see these hieroglyphics. I knew they were upgrading my software, so to speak. And they've raised our frequency so that during these ceremonies, we could experience things that, how we all know we're one. We know that, but during the ceremonies, you could feel it, you could experience it, and you could feel the tremendous love from Gaia, our mother. I mean, it was passionate, it was powerful. That's the kind of existence that these people were living in. And so we got to experience that. And we talk about that in the Awakening book.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. Yeah.
Beautiful. I have a lot of friends that are always saying, come to the Outback Company. They've been saying it for like 20, 25 years. And I've never been drawn to go because I live right on the ocean. My mother is the ocean. It's like, I don't want to leave my mother. Because as I said, Australia is just this massive land. And unlike America, we don't have those, in the Outback, we don't have those Great Lakes. There's not a lot of water. There's water, there's watering holes, but in the middle of America, you've got these massive lakes, so you can sit and see like what looks like an ocean or rivers, or it's different here in Australia. It's very earth. It's very earth. Yeah, the energy in the Outback is just incredible. Especially around Uluru. I mean, it's a vortex for very, very strong energy. It is.
So it just makes it easier to get into this higher vibrational state. I found the Outback to be incredibly harsh.
It is.
I felt like I had landed on Mars. I wasn't used to red dirt.
Yeah.
And it was so hard. I mean, you touch something and it'll splinter off in your hand. And I have to say, Karen, I felt relief one night. I was thinking, what did I do? This is crazy. I didn't even really think this through.
Yeah.
And then I heard a plane overhead as I'm lying in my sleeping bag the first night, and I felt such relief hearing that airplane, just knowing, okay, civilization is near. It's okay. It's just that it felt very different.
Yeah.
And meeting the Aboriginal women at night, it was frightening. There were these big bonfires, and it was a culture that I had never really encountered much. And I saw a dingo, and I felt such comfort in seeing the dingo, because I love animals. It's like, well, of course they have pets. Of course they have animals. And then I saw a little child, and it's like, well, of course they have children. These are women. These are families. So I calm down and realize this is such a rare opportunity to be here in ceremonies that are much more powerful than I had any understanding of. We actually created thunderstorms that kept coming and circling around the camp.
Yeah.
And they told us when we got back to the hotel a week later that they hadn't seen storms like that for years. And as I understand it, the Aboriginal women said that it was the white people that helped add to that energy. There were about maybe 20 white women from all over the world who were invited. And I brought a friend of mine from the United States who is very gifted and has the ability to see and communicate. So she was telepathically communicating with the Aboriginal tribeswomen for months before we got there. And then when we got there, they all were pointing at her because they recognized this is the one we've been talking to.
Great. Fabulous. I know, fabulous. I mean, it's true, but they're almost like an alien race, the remote Aboriginals, because they have a very different way of being. There's no such thing as time. As you say, you know, they say, okay, we're going to do this tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes and it doesn't happen, then the next day, and maybe weeks go. But you said you were going to do that like weeks ago. It wasn't the right time. You know, well, no, it isn't. It's like they're just completely guided, as you say, and well, let's get into the 5 principles, because the 5 principles will kind of explain what they're on about, because also they're not into, you know, what you look like, all that vanity that Western society goes on about. You know, you see them, they're dusty, they're dirty, that, you know, they just, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like, it's not that important. It's my connection to myself more important than, because the dust out there and the heat and the flies, you know, you have like a swarm of flies will land on your face, and I was hot, and you'll have dust stuck all over you. And here's the thing, as fleshy white people, we freak out, right? I think that's why I haven't gone, because I'm a fleshy white person. And the Aboriginals, it's like, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. What are you worried about? You know, they're just so down with it. They're so cool with it. They're so relaxed. And it's a personal growth, just going to that harsh environment, because you have to drop so many things that you think are important that are not important.
Exactly.
So let's talk
and
about
I have to, Well, I was just going to say, it felt so good to not worry about your hair. It could not have been more matted and more dirty. And there was just some freedom to that we all looked awful, and we didn't care. It was lovely. So the 5 principles, let's talk about that. And you can use this for anything, whether it's healing or manifesting, whatever you want. But the first step is willingness. So we're going to focus on the healing aspect. Are you willing to be well? Are you willing to make changes? Because some people have secondary gains. They may not. And Gary was surprised to learn through muscle testing, he wasn't willing to totally heal. He wasn't willing. So that you have to find out, you have to pay attention to, am I really willing to do what it takes? So that's the first step, is willingness. The second step is awareness. This is so important. You have to become aware of what are the emotional cores to this illness. And it's pretty predictable. Energy gets blocked for the same reasons. We tend to hold our grief in our chest area. If you're constantly having grief and you're not releasing it, and you have a propensity for heart disease or breast cancer, you could be potentially setting yourself up. So you have to become aware of that and releasing this and stop making more of it. Gary, when you have, like I had fibromyalgia, that's a whole system-wide, I have a lot of fear and stress going on, mainly stress. The whole system is involved in autoimmune diseases. So you pay attention to where that energy is blocked and what's going on. What are the emotional cores? And that's so important to become aware of. And I do consultations with people, and I connect to my healing team, which Gary is part of, to find out what are the emotional cores so that they can have an awareness and start releasing it. So the second step is awareness. Become aware of what started this, because it's kind of like if you start having these emotions, it's affecting your body, and it's like a blinking light on a dashboard on a car. And if you keep having these emotions and they're not fostering a vibrant body, and they keep creating problem and blockage and become toxic, now that light is on that dashboard all the time, and it's lit up and it's staying on, and it's called diabetes, fibromyalgia. It's a physical problem now. That's why you want to go back and get the emotional core. So the third step is acceptance. You may not like that this is in your life, but it's here for a reason. We can't forget that we are souls currently incarnated in a physical body, and that the soul plays a role in this. How is this here to help you grow? What is it here to teach you? Have an awareness that you may not like this disease, but accept that it's here for a reason, and it will help you grow. It becomes a blessing. Gary told people that that wheelchair was one of his biggest blessings because it forced this globe-trotting physicist, a businessman, to slow down and to disconnect from the mind and tap into this greater consciousness. So the third step is acceptance. The fourth step is empowerment. Take your power back. If I had believed what the doctors told me back in 85, when I was given a blood transfusion, they said I would never heal from hepatitis C. I'd have it the rest of my life. And if I had bought into that, I don't think I would have survived another 10 years. But I was motivated to find answers and survive for my little boy. And that's when I discovered there's all kinds of answers out there that medical science only knows what it knows at the moment. And so take your power back. If, again, that body, the soul, and the emotions are aligned with healing, anything can be healed. Anything. For most people, it's the emotional part. That's what's causing the problem. Our bodies are crumbling under the emotional weight. That's
Absolutely.
What's happening.
And I think I heard you say this when I was listening to you on another interview. A lot of people think that they're supposed to have some disease because it's a karmic thing, or, and I think that, as you said before, if you're suffering in any way, it's not a karmic thing, it's a wake-up call. And when you wake up, there is no need for it. But maybe your soul designed it that way. Maybe your soul said, okay, you're not getting the picture, let's just activate some of these cells within your body to dysfunction, so that you really start to listen to your inner guidance, or listen to your self-empowerment, or release some of the limiting ideas about yourself. As you said, your healing and Gary's healing occurred when you started to wake up to who you are as the infinite possibility, and connected to source and constantly guided. And so no disease, no suffering needs to be there when you get it. Yeah.
Exactly. And just because you have a genetic predisposition to something doesn't mean you have to have it either.
Absolutely.
Most people, and I really want our listeners to hear this, most people are not supposed to be sick. Their bodies can't handle all these toxic emotions. It's that fear-based negativity that the mind generates. It just can't handle it. Mm-hmm. Now, occasionally you run into situations where the soul wants them to experience that. And you will see children who are born a certain way, maybe autistic or deaf, because it was part of their journey and how they would experience things through that. But for most people, that's just not the case. They're intended to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. But even those people that are born with deficiency, let's call it, or what we perceive as deficiency, there's like Nick Vujicic. The man's got no arms and no legs. He's just a torso and a head. Like, he's the happiest guy on the planet. Mm-hmm. He's just so. As I said in another interview this week, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
Exactly.
You could be born with some disabilities, some so-called disabilities. I interviewed a guy that he hit his head on the swimming pool and woke up out of his coma. He could play any music, and he teamed up with a girl called Mandy Harvey, who was a singer who went deaf. And after wallowing in her own sort of like, poor me, I can't do what I'm here to do, she started singing again, and she feels the vibration of the music through her feet and sings. And she's amazing. So she's completely deaf and she's a singer, and she feels the beat through the vibrations in her body and not through her ears. So, it's all possible. Anything's possible, even inside disability. Anyway, please go on.
Well, and that's where you pay attention to what's the soul's voice in this.
Yeah.
Obviously their souls are very involved in what's going on with them. And this is why, again, I repeat, for most people, the soul is aligned with healing. Most people, it is. It's totally aligned. And the body's aligned. It's just that the emotions are usually what's holding people back. So the fourth one is empowerment. Take your power back. Because if you don't think you're going to heal, then chances are you won't. The mind is the biggest factor in healing. It's so important. And so that brings us to the last point, which is is focus on what you want. People, I love how the Aboriginal people have been doing this for who knows how long, and we're just waking up to quantum physics, which is what they know. You focus on what you want and you create and move in that direction. So they focus on a body already well. And this is what Gary did as a healer. I would ask him, what do you do? And he said, I see them well. And that's what I do too. When people come to me for consultations and sessions, I see them well. And that's the key. You start focusing on that. The body start moving in that direction. You start loving that body back. What's it telling you that it needed? I was so good at ignoring my body and just not loving it. So it's not, you start, what's the loving thing to do? It's give your body rest, good nutrition, but not just pay attention to what you're feeding it with good food and good water, but what am I feeding myself emotionally? What kind of thoughts am I generating? Because you're creating a different kind of cell depending on what kind of thoughts you're creating.
Hallelujah, Don. As a teacher of deliberate creation, that's what I teach. But this is what I found fascinating about you. And Danielle said, check out Robbie. My first thought was, I got enough people to talk to. But when I saw you online talking these principles, I was kind of shocked that the Aboriginal would teach, because I had no idea that's what they were teaching out. And here I live in Australia. So I had some ignorance that has been reawakened. Because these principles are principles of any healer or facilitator of healing, any energy healer. They're the same principles. They're global principles.
Yes.
And quantum
because
science,
it's truth.
Because it's truth. Yeah. And quantum science has been owning it, so here we've got the ancients talking about it. We've got scientists talking about it. We've got channels talking about it. We've got energy healers talking about it. I think the only ones not talking about it are the doctors. But they're starting to wake up too. I've heard many doctors ask, Bashar and Abraham Hicks questions on things on YouTube, and I'm thinking, yes, the doctor is waking up. So.
I think they are waking up. I have a friend who's very psychic and sort of a medical intuitive. She has doctors call her all the time, and they're not telling anybody, or police work with them. I think it's shifting. It's slowly shifting. And again, not all the Aboriginal people in Australia have this information and this way of living, but the ones that we encountered did. And so this is why.
Well, absolutely. And I would say it was this mass genocide, so there's not a hell of a lot of them left. But, the majority of the Indigenous Aboriginal culture are trying, are Western. They're newsreaders, they're reporters, they're out there, they're doctors, they're in the community. And then there is a lot of community that's outback, they're stuck between worlds. They're not fitting in with Western society. They're not fitting in with their ancient, and they're lost, and their alcoholic problem, there's a lot of alcoholics because they don't actually digest alcohol. Their physical bodies don't like white people do, so they get very sick. And yet, it's interesting.
It's interesting, Karen, because we have the exact same problem over here in the United States with the Native Americans. Okay. They have the exact same situation where they have become alcoholic. Their bodies, again, can't handle that alcohol. And many of them are very troubled. They've lost that disconnect from their land. They've lost that disconnect from who they are. And so every now and then you will meet those Native Americans who have stayed true to that wisdom and have tremendous abilities. Yeah. I remember I was talking at a conference one time, and I was mentioning how the remote Aboriginals that we were encountering were telepathic, they could shapeshift, they could remote view, all these astral travel. And there's this gentleman in the back of the room, and he's nodding his head that he can do all these things as well. And I find out later he's an Indian chief. So it's like it is in certain pockets. It just depends. So you can't really, it just goes to show you shouldn't judge anybody. You never know where they're at. But I feel like when they disconnected from the Aboriginal people, disconnected from their land, that's a huge part of their identity, and they became very lost.
Very much so.
So this is why it's nice to get back to the pure roots, the pure wisdom as much as possible.
Well, I feel more connected to the American Indians than I do the Aboriginal, Indigenous Australians, or I don't even like the Aboriginal Indigenous. Maybe that's a past life thing, I don't know. But the conversation that they have, I feel like every time I see an Aboriginal, it's always them and us. It's like our culture, me, and then the white. It's in their language. It's very divisive. It's very about division. It's about you white people, us black people. We're different. We're separate. But the other night, I went to a beautiful ceremony up the road, and there was Uncle Bob. So there was a welcome to country and a dance and a ceremony to start from a younger Aboriginal, like he was probably in his 30s or 40s, and then Uncle Bob came along. And for the first time, I heard an Indigenous of Australian say, "We are one," and I'm like, "Hallelujah!"
Yes, exactly.
You know, because I don't see any of us as separate, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. You know, we're humans. We're souls, you know, having a different experience. And we're so diverse, but we're all one. So Bob was the first time in all the time I've been on this land that I've seen and heard an Aboriginal person say, "We're one." And that was... And that's what the tribe would say, is that we are all one. Yeah. We're all connected. We're all just, you know, that's the one thing they think they'd want you to take away. It's interesting. I've been at I've been at gatherings with many different Indigenous cultures from all over the world, and they have some of the same things in common. They have a tremendous respect and love for the land. They've never lost that connection to Gaia, and they have tremendous respect for the ancestors. They feel very connected because we are part of them. Mm. So it's interesting that if you can get to some of these pockets where they've maintained that original connection, they will all say the same thing. It doesn't matter if they're coming from Peru or from Sydney. They can hear the trees singing to us. They can hear the mountains talking to each other. They have maintained that, and those are the ones, that's the wisdom I want to find out about. Absolutely. So what would you like to tell people about this? I mean, what do you want people to do? Obviously, buy the book, live the principles. The people that are fascinated in Indigenous culture, you know, maybe they feel like they need to come down under and experience it themselves. Would you recommend that? Or would you say just connect to them spiritually? You know, here's the thing. All my friends saying, come to the Outback, come to the Outback. I'm thinking I couldn't think of anything worse. You know, the flies, the dust. I'm going to stay close to the ocean, thanks. But recently, I was in meditation recently, and I had this Aboriginal chief show up in spirit and say, you know, just hang out with me. And I'm like, hello? Okay, what are you doing here?
You don't need to go to the Outback. I'm right here. Exactly. That's the thing. You don't need to go there. It's good. If you don't feel the calling to go, don't go. That sometimes you get that calling and you just know that there's a different thing. I think you're supposed to stay by the ocean, Karen. I just think you're supposed to stay.
It's on my bucket list, Robbie. It's on my bucket list. I got to get out to the Outback before I die, you know.
Okay. You got plenty of time.
It's really an experience. Like, you've been there, right? So it's really a wild experience. It's not easy. It's a challenging experience.
It's not easy. No. I think what I would love to get back to your original question, I think what I would love to leave our viewers and listeners with is that there's tremendous hope for them. Just because they've been given a diagnosis or they've been suffering with something, it doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. That body wants to heal. It knows how to heal. It's just an innate ability. You just need to figure out what are the emotional cores that are blocking that healing. And am I creating love-based emotions, compassion, gratitude, joy, that create those vibrant cells, that creates a vibrant body that enables that body to heal? So pay attention to what kind of energy are you creating, what kind of cells are you creating, and is it going to create that vibrant state? But more than anything, there's tremendous hope. I rarely run into people that they're not supposed to heal.
Exactly. You know, I think one of the most powerful statements of the 5 principles was the first one. And that was, what are you getting from being sick? You know, how did you word it again? The permission that you give.
Is there a secondary gain from being sick? Are you willing to get better?
Are you willing to get, because a lot of people use a sickness for, if I'm sick, you'll give me attention, or if I'm sick, you'll give me love. If I'm sick, I get love. You know, a friend of mine's partner died recently, a couple of years ago, but when she was diagnosed with cancer, the love that surrounded her, people gave her money. You know, there's a lot of, would you rather the health or would you rather the attention?
Right.
Like, that's a powerful step, that first step. That's
right.
the first step. Yeah.
And you don't have to know how to make those changes. You don't even need to know what those steps are, but just be willing to take that first step.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, it's been so beautiful to talk with you today. I don't know how long we've been talking. I've just been lost in time.
I have no idea. Doesn't matter. It's good. It's fun. I know. I'm surprised when you keep telling me it's morning because I'm about ready for dinner. So, yeah.
I should let you go and let you get...
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine.
So where can people, get the books? Where can they find out about you? I'll have on the YouTube, I'll have the thing underneath.
Okay.
People on radio?
Well, my website, I have a blog section that has a lot of information up there for people. We try to get as much information out there as possible. So if they go to holzwellness.com, that's HOLZWELLNESS.com. There's a lot of information that will help them.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and pass the word.
Absolutely, pass the word. Another question I want to ask you is, how is it being received in the States? I mean, how are people...
Oh, my goodness.
Are they finding it, are they more interested in it because it seems so elusive? It's Australia, it's all the way over there. Like if you'd written about, Native American Indigenous culture.
That's a really good point. I have to say it's fascinating because it's been received very well. In fact, that book, Secrets of Aboriginal Healing, is now in over 40 countries, and it was just published in Slovenian.
Wow.
So it's fascinating what pockets around the world there's a true fascination for Aboriginal people, and especially here in the States. You go to England, Germany, Slovenia, they have a real love and respect for the Aboriginal people. They don't know why, but they just do. And I think that's Mute and Message Down Under really worldwide open people up to that. So it's just is doing tremendously well. That's a great question. If it had been about Native American healing secrets in the United States, would it have done so well? I can't. That's a good question.
I remember.
But it also is doing really well in Australia.
Great.
So that tells you something too.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's why I wanted to talk to you today, because I wanted to promote, the Indigenous people, because they're beautiful.
Yeah.
They have many beautiful, they're beautiful people. They're beautiful people and different. They're so different. Because here's the thing about American, the American thing is very pretty. It's like feathers. They look lovely, and Hollywood portrayed them as so beautiful. Whereas the Aboriginals are pretty rough looking.
They're pretty rough looking. Yeah. I know. I couldn't believe they were, when we came in for the shower after being in the Outback, and I have to say it was the longest shower of my life and the most enjoyable. I couldn't believe they were still out there in that harsh, dusty environment. It's not glamorous. It's definitely not glamorous.
But the thing is that it's like water off a duck's back. They don't mind. If only we could be as, I aspire to be as not worried about what I look like and not worried about the elements and the environment, just comfortable in my own skin, no matter what the circumstances, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether my hair's messed up, whether I've got lipstick on or not, whether flies are all over my face, could I be as comfortable in my own skin as them? I mean, that's really a message that they bring. Yeah.
And they feel immense gratitude. That's what they feel. They don't see it as a harsh environment. They just see it as this beautiful gift.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think they believe that we have very chaotic lives and we are very primitive in so many ways, and I would totally agree with them. Yeah.
I agree with them too. Very close. I just wanted to say one thing. When I was waking up and doing the whole ascension thing in the early 90s, I heard that Uluru, that Ayers Rock, is this massive crystal underneath, and that it's the heart chakra of the planet. That's something I heard. I don't know if that's the truth, but that's what the spiritual community was saying, that Uluru is this heart chakra of the planet. So it was interesting.
Well, I understand, my guides are telling me right now that there is a huge crystal there, but I don't know that it's the heart chakra. I think I've been told that Hawaii, that area, tends to, be the heart chakra, but I think that Uluru is one of the chakras. Let me see if they'll, it very well might be the first one, the root. Wouldn't that make sense? That's what my team is telling me now.
Okay.
Which is really sort of, isn't that where the birth was? People have always believed that the birthing of humanity came from that area. And I believe that the Aboriginal people do. So that would make sense that it's the root.
Yeah.
That's just what I'm getting at the moment. So, yeah.
Cool. Robbie, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you. It's been such a delight.
On ATP, and blessings and good luck with, I don't need to say good luck, but the book sounds fabulous. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Karen. Really enjoyed it. Take care.
Thanks so much for joining us for another enlightened conversation on Accentuate the Positive. If you would like spiritual guidance from my guides, Blissful Beings, go to KarenSwain.com for a reading, or to listen to more enlightened thought leaders share their wisdom. Go to the listen page on KarenSwain.com and choose who you want to listen to. All the podcasts are also available on iTunes. Remember to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it, we're there. Until next time, bye for now.
If you feel like that's what you want to do,